Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. I'm your host, Kylie Como. I'm the legal nurse consultant here at Shane Smith Law. And today I'm joined again for part two of our discussion with Dr. Robert Bashuk from the Concussion Center in Atlanta, Georgia. It's good to see you, Dr. Bashuk.
Great to see you, Kylie. So what are processes that increase or decrease hippocampal neurogenesis? Think about this concept for just a second. We know that antidepressants will improve neurogenesis. Is this why they help with depression? That's the theory now, okay? Any of the antidepressants, especially the SSRIs, improve neurogenesis. Is this why they work with depression? Is this why people with depression often have cognitive problems? Now, don't forget that learning and exercise promote neurogenesis as well. Excessive stress, a little stress is always good. So when I prepare these talks, I feel like I'm under a little stress, but it gets me motivated, all right? But excess stress results in increased cortisol levels, which also inhibit hippocampal neurogenesis. Now, this is kind of going to relate all this to concussion here. So for a neural stem cell to begin to proliferate and differentiate, it requires glutamate. Now, didn't we just talk about glutamate a little while ago, that excess glutamate occurs with concussion? So immediately after a TBI, again, whether it's a mild, moderate, or severe, there's a massive release of glutamate, which causes an excess calcium entrance into the neuron. This results in dysfunction of the mitochondria of the cell. We already talked about that. When this occurs, when this traumatic brain injury occurs, you get neuroinflammation. Neural stem cells are damaged by this excess glutamate and this excess calcium, and the onset of neuroinflammation. The degree of injury to the neural stem cells, the hippocampal neurogenesis and the dentate gyrus, will be determined by their vulnerability. And there are a lot of factors that can affect their vulnerability, such as, do you have B12 deficiency? Do you have vitamin D deficiency? A lot of people do. Do you have omega-3 deficiency? What kind of stress is going on? Has there been a significant release of cortisol? So all of these factors, the excess glutamate, the mitochondrial dysfunction, all of these contribute to the degree of injury to the neural stem cells. So are the complaints of cognitive dysfunction and depression after a concussion or a moderate or severe traumatic brain injury due to disrupted hippocampal neurogenesis? I think the answer is yes. So what can you do to improve this neurogenesis? Well, we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm going to go into this a little bit more. So an enriched environment. So when you go to a new place and you see all these things you've never seen before, you are stimulating hippocampal neurogenesis. When you go on a different path on your hike and see different things, when you learn new things, when you do some type of painting or art projects, when you learn a musical instrument, when you have a new hobby, you read a new book, you go to a new restaurant, you have new food, all of these things stimulate neurogenesis. Now, you may go to a new restaurant, and I ordered some food yesterday from DoorDash that I didn't particularly like, but it still promotes neurogenesis because you know what? I'm not going to order from that restaurant again, all right? Even though I didn't like it that much, I'm not going to order from there again. And then another little story, this is pretty silly, is I was on a trip coming back from Australia, and it's like a 14-hour flight, and I watched these 3 movies, and they were the dumbest, worst movies I've ever seen. And guess what? I still remember that, okay? And I can tell you what the movies are because they were so bad and so dumb. Even though they were bad, they stimulated hippocampal neurogenesis. What improves neurogenesis? Well, we've already talked about aerobic exercise. Think Buffalo Concussion treadmill test, Buffalo Concussion bike test. But any type of aerobic exercise really improves hippocampal neurogenesis. That's why everybody with a concussion that we see at the Concussion Center, most of them get the Buffalo Concussion treadmill test or bike test, unless they've got a broken leg or they've got heart disease and they have some contraindication. Sex stimulates hippocampal neurogenesis. A healthy diet, a low inflammatory diet, learning an art, painting it, for example, just going out with your friends and having a good time, talking about something, that stimulates it. Good sleep. Again, think about the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system clears all the debris in the brain while you're sleeping. So if you don't sleep, if you stay up all night, you feel like you've had a concussion because the hippocampal neurogenesis is turned off and you've got all of this neuroinflammation going on up in the brain. You got to get rid of it. So when you go to sleep the next night after you've been up all night, you sleep so much better. You sleep a really deep sleep and you wake up feeling much, much better. Intermittent fasting can help. Caloric restriction can help. Blueberries. I eat blueberries every day. Omega-3 fatty acids. I take omega-3 every day. Curcumin helps improve hippocampal neurogenesis. How crazy is this? Crunchy foods help. I don't know why, but they do. And B vitamins seem to help. Now, we talked about stress. Stress will negatively affect hippocampal neurogenesis. Think about adverse childhood events, ACE, how they can have long-term consequences in a child and affect their memory. So what are the adverse childhood events? If there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, if there's neglect, witnessing domestic violence, parental incarceration, substance abuse in the house, divorce, parental separation, these are all significant adverse childhood events. And is it the stress? Probably. This interferes with hippocampal neurogenesis and can really affect a child's cognitive ability long term. So again, we talked about stress several times. Again, aging, think about neurodegenerative disorders. I think this is what happens in Alzheimer's disease. As we get older, these dentate gyrus cells, these new cells, you get less of them. And when that happens, your cognitive ability declines. Neuroinflammation, chemotherapy, we've already talked about that. A high saturated fat diet, all of these things cause negative neurogenesis. A high sugar diet, alcohol, and we talked about crunchy food, but soft food makes it worse. And I have no idea why. Vitamin deficiencies, we talked about sleep, the glymphatic system. Again, if you stay up all night, you feel like you've had a concussion. Patients with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. You know, I took care of people with epilepsy for years and years. And after a seizure, a lot of people have significant memory issues for weeks. And I think it's because the seizure, this massive electrical impulse, kind of like a concussion, interferes with hippocampal neurogenesis. And people with a stroke, all of these people often will have brain fog. So I'm just going to say a little bit about memory encoding. And this is basically how information is processed and stored in our brain for memory. So there's visual encoding, and this is when you see something, then you recognize it. And this is now put in your brain, and you will remember it. You'll be able to recognize it in the future. Acoustic encoding involves auditory information such as sounds or words, recognizing somebody's voice. About 45 years ago, back in the early 1980s, I was the intern at Talmadge Memorial Hospital. And I was talking to somebody, something serious, a patient we were having a discussion with another doctor. And one of my favorite movies is Gone with the Wind. And I'm sitting there talking to this person and I hear this voice, okay? And I looked at the person I was talking with. I stopped everything that I was doing. And I said, that is Butterfly McQueen. I guarantee it. Yeah. And I turned her, she lived in Augusta. And I turned around and that was Butterfly McQueen. Wow. And my favorite part of that movie is Butterfly McQueen is Scarlett wants her to deliver a baby and she says, lousy Miss Scarlett, I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. Okay. Right. I just love that line. I don't know why, but anytime I think about Going with the Wind, that's my favorite part. And there she was right behind me. And I was right, okay? Because I had my acoustic encoding was working really well. Okay?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's impressive.
And then semantic encoding is processing information that has a lot of meaning, facts, ideas, concepts, like hippocampal neurogenesis. Okay. Elaborative encoding is relating new information to something that's already in your memory. So Brussels is the capital of Belgium, and Belgium is really famous for chocolate. Okay. That's elaborate encoding. And then organizational encoding is classifying information, identifying relationships between items, the fork and the spoon, the vehicle and the gas station. You to go get gas, I got to get gas. Where do I get it? I get it at the gas station for my vehicle. And there are a couple of other memory related processes that we can't get into, but there's memory storage where you retain information, and then it's retrieval. It's getting that information out of the storage and into conscious awareness. So when I heard Butterfly McQueen, my acoustic sensation was cranked. My memory storage, I had retained that information, and I was able to retrieve it immediately. And all of these things can be injured when hippocampal neurogenesis is dysfunctional. And that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope that you learned something today.
Man, did I? That was rich. Probably one of the bigger takeaways that I got was just the contrast. And I think it's something that our audience, even those that aren't familiar with concepts like these or some of the anatomical features or whatnot, but just the high level, right? The contrast between those who maybe live a sedentary lifestyle, don't get very good sleep. They rest a lot, they sit a lot, but that's not sleep, right? That's different than delta wave sleep, which is what we're talking about here with the lymphatic system and getting that to function properly. But, poor sleep versus good sleep and exercise and active lifestyle versus, that sedentary, same old routine. I mean, just the contrast really kind of opened my eyes to how, there are obvious reasons to live a healthy lifestyle, but hippocampal neurogenesis, who'd have put that one together? So you're actually growing your brain and you're avoiding problems down the road.
So I'll tell you what I'm telling people a lot now. Okay, so we check for B12, we check for omega levels, we check for vitamin D levels, and I can tell you we find lots of abnormalities. And again, when you get somebody with a concussion, what I tell them is this: if you take two people and they have the exact same injury, they're the exact same person who's got the good vitamin D level and the good omega-3 level and the good B12 level, they're going to recover faster than the person whose levels are low. Okay. And I also tell people that the better shape you're in, the quicker you're going to, if you get another concussion, the quicker you are going to recover. And I have to say, that's kind of the small picture, but the big picture to me is, if you've got good omega-3 and you got good vitamin D and you got good B12 and you've got good mitochondria because you're exercising, the likelihood that you're going to develop neurodegenerative diseases when you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s goes down, in my opinion, dramatically. There's an enormous amount of research on this. We are not exactly there yet, but this is where all of the research is heading, that if you take care of yourself, then you're going to have a better quality of life. You are less likely to develop these degenerative disorders of the brain, or if you do get them, they will be at a much later period and they'll be much milder. So to me, that is really the take-home message. And I also I talk now with the patients about the hippocampal neurogenesis and the need to do different things, do hobbies, go to different places, get out, do things. And it just improves your brain, and it'll improve your longevity and your quality of life. Of course, anything can happen to anybody at any time, but all things being equal, you are much more likely to have an improved quality of life and a longer quality of life.
That's amazing. And you're not, because everybody's access is a little different. People who live in a large inner city may not have access to the different sights and sounds of maybe somebody out in more open spaces, but it's really not about that. It's just about newness, right? Just new experiences, new feels, new tactile experiences, new taste, right? It doesn't have to be big and grand, right? It's just
exactly. No, it absolutely does not have to be big and grand. It just needs to be new and different.
Yeah.
Okay. New and different. Watch a new movie. Okay. Even if you don't like it, that's okay.
Yeah, good point too.
Okay. All right. Go to a new restaurant. Okay. Order something that you've never ordered before. You might not like it. That's okay. I mean, it's still going to help your brain.
That's great. I consider myself to have a pretty decent lifestyle, active, all that. I like to try new things, but I do tend to be a creature of habit in other ways. So you give me a lot to think about, some changes I might be able to make, and like you said, kind of stave off some potential downside in the future. So this has been great information.
And that's why you want to take your child and have new experiences for let them see something different. Okay, go somewhere else, do something a little bit different. They may not like it, but that's okay. It's still stimulating hippocampal neurogenesis.
That's amazing. Well, I know that you've said to me, we've had many conversations, other podcasts, which I hope our viewers can go back and look for those. They're always great discussions having Dr. Bashuk here, but I know you've said to me that the mission for the Concussion Center is evidence-based concussion with that, was it the growth mindset, right? Evidence.
That is correct, yes.
Mindset. Well, I'm pretty sure everyone who's listened today would agree that this discussion here today really just kind of encapsulates that statement just to a T. So thank you so much.
Well, glad to do it. And I look forward to doing this again with you. And I'll come up with something new because it's going to stimulate my hippocampal neurogenesis and I want to stimulate everybody's hippocampus.
I'm all about that. I love that. I'm going to start using that too in some of my conversations. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much and have a great day.
Yes, sir. Okay, everybody, that's going to do it for another great episode of Mind Matters, Navigating Head Injuries and Concussions. Again, I want to thank our guest, Dr. Robert Bashuk with the Concussion Center, for sharing his passion and deep knowledge with us. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. And if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to keep up with our latest and greatest content. And leave us a comment and let us know what you thought of today's discussion. And as always, please, if you're in pain, remember to call Shane at 980-999-9999. Thanks a lot.
In pain, so I call Shane. 980-999-9999. In pain, call Shane.